Well, again, welcome to today's town hall meeting, COVID-19 vaccine development and distribution update. At the Quad Cities Chamber, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary, and our role in serving the area's business community has never been more important. And our team is working hard on your behalf every day. And this has been quite a year. And I know that we've had our many challenges as a region, and we're really optimistic about what the next year will have for us. As we work with our healthcare industry, we know that healthcare workers began to receive the first COVID-19 vaccine doses in our region earlier this week, and there's much anticipation about multiple sectors surrounding that rollout process. So to keep you informed, the Chamber welcomes many experts today from our COVID-19 Coalition healthcare partners to give you, our business leaders, the latest information on vaccine development and distribution plans in both Iowa and in Illinois. Following today's panel presentation, we'll open up our Q&A session. So if you have questions, I encourage you to use the chat box feature of today's call, and we will address as many as possible. We're also recording this session that we can put it on our website for others to view later, or for you to share or go back to if you need to. So our first speaker, I want to introduce Dr. Lewis Katz. He's a board-certified internist and infectious disease specialist who trained at the University of Iowa. He's an adjunct clinical professor at the Roy and Lucille Carver College of Medicine. He served on as chief medical officer for the America's Blood Centers in Washington, D.C. He currently serves as the medical director for Scott County Health Department and the Project of the Quad Cities, as well as the chief medical officer for the Mississippi Valley Regional Blood Center. Dr. Katz, thank you very much for joining us today and kicking us off. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Paul, and for the invitation. I'm going to share my screen, I hope. Yeah. There we go. You should be looking at the epidemic curve in Scott County. The curve in Rock Island County is not dissimilar. I think the critical things to pay attention to is that our 14-day moving average of the case counts about 70 per 100,000, 120 deaths in Scott County, and sufficient in Rock Island County that we're over 300 in the metro area. Test positive rate around 17% on the Iowa side. Just for perspective, as I've thought about these metrics, over the last several months, my criteria for expanding face-to-face education in our school systems have been moving average case count of 5 to 10 and a test positive rate around 5. So as you can see, we're really in the middle of continued uncontrolled community spread. And now, if I can get my PowerPoint to move, there we go. I just want to deal very quickly with the idea that that there was any rush in the development and availability of these vaccines. The process that I've laid out for you is the routine vaccine approval process, with the exception of inserting the EUA emergency use authorization step kind of in the middle. And the bottom line here is that the vaccine process has been identical and even perhaps somewhat more rigorous than the standard vaccine development schedule. The reason that we've been able to move so quickly, number one, is literally decades of basic science investment that very luckily had us ready to respond in January and February when the pandemic was being recognized. Then, instead of doing these steps in sequence as they usually are, they've really been done in parallel. So phase 1 and 2, 2 and 3 studies were going on simultaneously, not one after the other. The FDA, both in consideration of an emergency use authorization and approval, has been reviewing data as it's been submitted rather than waiting for a final submission. So parallelism, and then maybe more important than anything is what I call overtime at both FDA and CDC. It means that the professionals at those two agencies have been working 24/7, 365. And oh, by the way, they're all salaried. They're not getting overtime pay. They're just working harder. All the review organs involved, institutional review boards, data safety monitoring boards, are independent of HHS. These are not government employees or political appointees. They're independent volunteers. Again, the FDA's Vaccine and Related Biologic Products Advisory Committee is an independent, unpaid panel of subject matter experts. And in fact, the only relevant political appointee in the approval sequence is in fact the FDA commissioner. And I think he's learned his lesson after hydroxychloroquine about transparency and using science. These are the candidate vaccines that Operation Warp Speed has invested in. And the only two we're going to talk about today are BioNTech, Pfizer, and Moderna. They have completed their phase 3 trials. You know that the EUA has been granted for Pfizer, and tomorrow will be the Vaccine Advisory Committee at FDA listening to the Moderna data. I am certain, having reviewed all the data, they will recommend EUA and pass it on to CDC for their consideration, which will occur, I think, on Saturday. I will be on those calls monitoring what is said. How well do these two vaccines work? Very well. And I can tell you absolutely far beyond my most optimistic expectations. mRNA is a new platform, that is true, and the efficacy of these two vaccines is absolutely remarkable. The early data from both suggest not only that they will prevent illness in the vaccinated population, but they look very likely to be very effective against severe disease. The manifestations of COVID-19 that wind you up in the hospital, in the ICU, on ventilators, etc. The AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine is fascinating, and there are some incongruities in the results from their clinical trials that I think will slow down an EUA for that vaccine probably by a few weeks, but stay tuned. The data that we have is the impact on illness, not infection and not transmission. That will be important further on. Safety, both companies did press releases early on during November, basically saying no serious safety concerns. And I agree with them. It just depends on how you define serious safety concerns in a certain sense. The table that I've given you here is adverse drug events that interrupt activities of daily living. In the jargon of vaccine trials and drug trials, these are what are called grade 3 or higher adverse events. And what you see here are the rates in the briefing documents provided by FDA and the company for fever, fatigue, muscle and joint pain, and headache. The bottom line here is grade 3 or higher. They're almost all grade 3. There are very, very few grade 4 events that are much more serious, almost none for both. The bottom line here, and the reason I want you to see these raw numbers, is you can expect as you immunize your employees, somewhere in the range of 10% are going to want a day off a day or two after they get the vaccine shot. That's the bottom line that I'm trying to tell you here. The safety data are from a median of 2 months follow-up after the second dose of both vaccines. There are multiple programs to monitor safety going forward, and serious adverse events beyond 6 weeks after completion of a vaccine series are in fact very, very rare. And the two most relevant examples I've showed you here, these were killed vaccines for measles and respiratory syncytial virus back in the 60s, probably not relevant to these vaccines. Now, this is your final exam. In order to get credit for attending the webinar, you have to be able to repeat this slide to me. Kidding. These are the systems that are in place in the US for monitoring long-term safety. I'm not going to go into it, but it's just to show you that there's a whole lot of stuff that range from the standard vaccine adverse effect reporting system at the top that all our family practitioners and pediatricians are very familiar with, to big data projects mining electronic health records at the VA and elsewhere that will be looking sometimes in real time for unexpected events that occur beyond that 2-month median follow-up. Of course, the companies are continuing their clinical trials out to 2 years and beyond, also to look for unexpected adverse events. I don't expect any, but you don't know until you know. So this is the EUA, and just look at the stuff in red. I'm going to tell you how you get an EUA. So SARS-CoV-2 can cause a serious or life-threatening disease, number one, based on the totality of scientific evidence available to FDA. The known and potential benefits outweigh the known and potential risks. There is no adequate approved available alternative. That is what FDA, the Vaccine and Related Biologic Products Advisory Committee, the commissioner of the FDA, have to agree upon. It has been agreed upon for the Pfizer vaccine, and I'm just nearly certain it will be agreed upon for the Moderna vaccine tomorrow. What are the gaps? What don't we know at this point about these two vaccines? Duration of immunity. We know that they prevent infection, but we don't know for how long. We know that they prevent illness, but we don't know for how long. We don't know to what degree they prevent infection and transmission. Critically important in how the vaccines roll out and what we do about other preventive measures. There are subgroups we don't know about. The important ones are listed here. And then there are other softer endpoints that we need to think about. How we assure equity of access to underserved and over-affected populations. What will be the impact of vaccine hesitancy on rollout? And I've already talked about long-term adverse effects that I don't expect to see. So we have 9 non-pharmaceutical interventions that we're asking people to use. You're familiar with wearing masks, social distancing, physical distancing, contact tracing, et cetera, hand washing and whatnot. Nothing changes. And the reason nothing changes in the short run is that 95% efficacy is not 100%. I've already told you we don't have data on how long protection lasts, critically important. We don't know whether the vaccine is going to have how much impact on actual infection or transmission of the virus, both of which are different than illness. We know that there's transmission from asymptomatic infections, probably half of the transmissions that are recognized are from pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic individuals. There is a risk for second infections. Reinfection does occur. It's at the case report level at this point, but it does occur and it's very hard to study. And we don't know what's needed for herd immunity. So well into probably second or third quarter of 2021, masking physical and social distancing, et cetera, remain absolutely critical. You have to stay alive to get the vaccine, is what I'm telling you. This is how the priority groups for receipt of the vaccine were determined. This was a sort of a joint project of the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine and the CDC. First was the science, safety and efficacy that I've already briefly summarized for you. Secondly, can the implementation in the priority groups you're talking about be done? And then third, these aren't in order of priority, they're all considered simultaneously. The ethics, to maximize benefits, minimize harm, promote justice, and mitigate inequities, and transparency. And I'm not going to get into whether we've been perfect for everything, but I think we've done a good job. These are the phase 1 groups by 13-1 on the 1st of December at the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices at CDC. They used the National Academy's framework and came up with 24 million individuals for the first phase. 21 million essentially healthcare personnel, 3 million individuals in extended care facilities. On the left-hand side, the healthcare personnel are not in priority order. All these people essentially eligible as soon as feasible. On the right-hand side, the long-term care residents are in fact prioritized. So skilled nursing first, assisted living second, other congregate care third, according to the ACIP approach. Pretty straightforward, and these will, the healthcare personnel will likely be a little bit stratified during the early phases of 1A because of lack of vaccine. So this is the proposed sequence just to get through phase 1. Phase 1A, I told you about, healthcare workers, long-term care. 1B will be essential workers, and examples are provided and I think are pretty good. Teachers especially, food, ag, utilities, police and fire, transportation. I think that's a pretty good list. 1C is adults with high-risk medical conditions and adults 65 and older. And those phases will undoubtedly overlap somewhat, and what the gating criteria for moving from one to the next are really haven't been well determined yet. This is a little bit bothersome. This is a nice survey that was published in the journal Science in September or early October. Do you plan to get vaccinated? Look at the bottom line first. Half of the overall population in the US in this survey intended to be vaccinated when the vaccine became available. A third or so were uncertain, and 20% said no. And then you can see differences according to race, ethnicity, and age. So this is very concerning. If I believe the vaccine is safe and highly effective, how do I get past the degree of hesitancy being seen here so that we can roll out a lot of vaccine to a lot of people quickly and fully reopen society? I don't have the answer, but we're working on it. When will I take the Pfizer vaccine? This may be pretty obvious from what I've said so far. I'll take it the first day that I am eligible. That's based on really 3 considerations. First and foremost, the data, high efficacy, and the safety that really reflects what we expect from almost any vaccine. Secondly, I spent almost 8 years in Washington in almost daily contact with the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. And I know the career scientists well. The director of CBER, Peter Marks, is a good friend of mine, and I trust their judgment and word implicitly after working with them so closely over such a long period of time. The integrity of the FDA process, and particularly the advisory committee process, is, as far as I'm concerned, largely beyond reproach. I was a member on 2 occasions of the Blood Products Advisory Committee, chaired it for a year, and have served as a temporary voting member on other advisory committees. I understand the process. I think it's a great process. So I have no qualms. And that's all I wanted to say.
All right, Dr. Katz, thank you very much for your presentation. I do have one question that was asked in the chat box. I'm going to ask you right now and not wait to the end. When you're referencing quarters, the question came in as to whether or not you were referencing fiscal year quarters or calendar year quarters.
I'm a doctor. I only do calendar years.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Katz. We will open back up to questions, and I see many coming in the Q&A box right now, and we'll continue to get to those. I want to continue on and welcome Amy Thorson. She is the Deputy Director at the Scott County Health Department. Amy facilitates the internal operations of the health department, which includes the COVID-19 public health response. So Amy, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. First, I wanted to thank the Chamber for continuing to share information with your members. It's been a valuable partnership, and you've been so engaged in the community and our QVC COVID Coalition. So thank you for that continued partnership and for making opportunities like this available to your members. Secondly, I wanted to acknowledge all of you members for what you're doing during such a challenging year. This has been a rough one for all of you, and I'm consistently reminded by a friend that you can do hard things, and you have had to do so many hard things and weather so many unknowns. And as we bring this information to you on vaccine and vaccine planning, there are still many unknown, some that Dr. Katz shared, some that Janet and I will continue to share. And so we just appreciate you for just rolling with these changes. I know one of the challenges that has been throughout this whole response is the differences that do exist in our bi-state community. And those differences will likely continue to exist as Iowa and Illinois deploy their plans for vaccine delivery. So while we all are moving towards the same end goal, we may move there a little differently throughout as we work through this within our own state boundaries. So I wanted to give you just a quick overview of what's happening here in Iowa. At the state level, the Iowa Department of Public Health and the governor's office really have overall vaccine management for the state. They're in regular communication with the CDC regarding what might be coming to Iowa, how we need to have plans developed, and all of those various infrastructure things that have to exist to move this vaccine effort going. They've been working for months and months and months on this plan and trying to figure out what makes sense using plans that have already been in place for different pandemics and vaccine preventable illnesses, as well as other plans that are being created because the COVID vaccine and the COVID pandemic are providing some unique opportunities for us all. You can't run a large clinic with lots of people really close during the middle of this pandemic. Another area that they're working through is provider agreements. So any agency that wants to receive and provide COVID-19 vaccine has to have a CDC provider agreement. And that provider agreement includes information on what kind of vaccine storage exists. So we know that the Pfizer vaccine is coming and requires ultra cold storage for its longest storage possibilities. So they're looking to find out who has that ultra cold storage. The Moderna will be a frozen vaccine, so that is another level of storage. And then we do know that future vaccines will require refrigerated vaccine. When we thaw these frozen ones, they go back in the refrigerator. So they're really trying to make sure that individuals who want to receive the vaccine understand the storage and handling requirements, because we want to protect this vaccine. We want to assure that it remains effective, and not everyone has the capability. And so for some of you that may be larger employers, as you're looking for your own occupational health providers, that's a question that you need to ask is, does our facility have the capabilities to store and manage vaccine? Do we have history doing that? Do we have the temperature monitoring systems in place? And then those providers will actually have to be able to enter information into the state immunization registry. In Iowa, it's called IRIS. The next thing that the state health department is doing is really managing all of the data reporting to CDC. As Dr. Katz shared, there are lots of people wanting data on who's receiving vaccine. How is it going? Are we getting people to take it? How many people are taking it? What kind of vaccine reactions are they having? Were there any mistakes in the delivery? And so all of that information is being reported to the state and to the CDC so that they can continue to learn and grow the body of knowledge around this vaccine and the vaccine delivery process. The state is also receiving the vaccine allocations from the CDC and then allocating those to local areas. There's two components of that. One is allocations that will be said, Scott County Health Department, there are this many doses of vaccine coming to your county. And the other is allocating for bigger projects. You may have heard that there is a national pharmacy partnership with long-term care facilities and ultimately other assisted living and congregate living facilities. So they're taking some of the vaccine and allocating it to local communities to manage the healthcare worker priority population. And then they're taking other allocations and targeting that towards that national pharmacy partnership. There are very specific measures that have to be put in place before they can activate that partnership. And so they'll be overseeing those efforts as well. We anticipate some work with our local skilled nursing facilities to start the week of December 28th. And then the other component from that state perspective is the establishment of an infectious disease advisory council. So the state has convened a group of experts and internal subject matters to serve on that advisory council. And that group will be taking the information that we receive from the federal government and the ACIP and helping to make that priority level effective here in Iowa. They are also planning to develop a process to solicit information from employers and other interested parties throughout the state to better understand the unique considerations of their workforce. And as I said, they're helping to develop the COVID-19 vaccine distribution guidance and prioritization of populations, especially early in this response when we know the vaccine supply is limited. They've already met twice, and we anticipate some information coming from them about the prioritizations within priority A, as well as the vaccine slowly comes to our community. Dr. Katz showed you a slide on the proposed levels in phase 1, and I know Janet will talk a little bit about that as well. But it's important to know that the only one that's voted on right now from the ACIP is 1A. So there's lots of hope and expectations for everybody in that 1B category, but we're still waiting to see what that looks like. We know during the early stages of the pandemic when closures were in place and information regarding individuals that could continue to work from essential businesses or critical infrastructure businesses was very important, that 60 to 70, perhaps even 80% of the workforce in Iowa falls in that category. And so we don't know yet how far down the supply chain those services will meet those definitions. If I make paper that makes textbooks for school, am I in that education sector, or are we only talking about teachers and aides and food service workers in those schools? So we're really still waiting to see how far down that supply chain we will move, particularly knowing that we still have limited vaccine supplies, and the group that's identified in 1C is those 65 plus and people with chronic medical conditions. So there's a lot of information there that we are still waiting for. As we move to the local level, in Scott County, one of our largest priorities is communication. That's communicating with our partners through things like the QC COVID Coalition and other efforts. It's communicating to individuals who have questions and want information. It's providing educational opportunities like this. And then we do know general community education. There's so many people excited about this. There's so many people nervous about this that we want to continue to provide good coordinated communication and messages throughout the community. And we're using our partners, many of which are on this call today, to help us draft those messages and speak with one community as a voice. We're trying to link to information that people can get their questions answered. In Iowa, public health departments will be the ones that are being given the task or opportunity, I guess it depends on how you view it, to direct vaccine in our communities. So while these initial few weeks are a little bit, I guess, scattered based upon holidays and vaccine just being approved, once we move into January, we anticipate receiving an email on Monday saying this many doses of vaccine are eligible to come to Scott County. Where should they go? And that allocation will be based upon where we are in our response and who has the vaccine provider agreements approved and can take that kind of vaccine. Not everybody can take the Pfizer vaccine. And so we need to work with them to figure out what type of vaccine we can provide and where it goes, where is our biggest need, because we want to move our community forward together. We know that Genesis and Unity Point are the large healthcare systems in our community, but they are not the only healthcare systems in our community. And there's other people involved in that response, our EMS providers, that we want to continue to move forward our entire healthcare population. So we will be working with partners to make decisions regarding where that vaccine goes based upon the vaccine allocations that we are receiving. And then we are also putting in place plans for a community clinic. So we, again, want to keep this effort moving forward collectively. So we can't wait till one's done and then move to the other. So we've been talking with partners since September regarding how we want to handle vaccination, particularly in Scott County. And so we made a collaborative decision to jointly run a community clinic that will allow us to move people through it efficiently with social distancing and provide proper vaccine storage. In the past, H1N1, we went to a lot of facilities and vaccinated, but with social distancing and, as Dr. Katz talked about, the potential for people wanting to take a day off after they receive the vaccine because of some of the response or reaction that they may receive, we need to make sure we allow for spacing. So we can't be coming back to a facility 3 or 4 days in a row and continue to move forward. So we'll be jointly running a community clinic. And then lastly, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what your businesses can be doing now. I know we all want to move this forward. there's going to be great celebrations as we turn to 2021. But this isn't over yet, and it's going to take considerable time to bring this vaccine plan through all of the people who want to receive it. So I encourage you to stay engaged with your partners. The Chamber is a great resource. They're active in our discussions. Continue to practice those workplace safety issues. Apparently I haven't moved. Sorry about that. That Dr. Katz talked about with your staff. We can't stop what we're doing right now to keep us all protected. Begin looking at some of those business operations that you have. So if you do move forward with vaccine, how could you stagger your staff to prevent any unnecessary needs to close because all of your first shift employees were gone because they received vaccination on the day. Share credible information with your employees and practice patience. We know that people want to move forward, and we're doing our best to do that. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you.
Amy, thank you very much for the perspective from Scott County Health Department. Very important information that you shared with us. Next, I want to welcome Janet Hill. She's the Chief Operating Officer for the Rock Island County Health Department. Janet, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, are you able to share your screen? I know you have.
Yeah, I'm working. Let's see.
All right, there it is.
All right, good.
All right.
Well, thank you for having us. We do appreciate this opportunity to speak directly to leaders in our community. So, as Amy mentioned, there are differences between our states, and I will try to go through those as succinctly as possible. Okay, so public health in Illinois has a long history of emergency preparedness planning, and we built upon that partnerships by forming the QC-19 coalition. That came together extremely quickly because of the relationships and the partnerships that we have been making since right after 9/11. The emergency preparedness and response was a result of the attacks of 9/11. So while we have been preparing for this moment, we've also been responding at the same time. So our emergency preparedness manager, Kate Meyer, has been giving PPE to long-term care facilities. We have been communicating public health guidance throughout this. And one thing that we have that is really important to us is our administrator, Nita Ludwig, before she became administrator, was the longtime emergency preparedness manager. So we're very grateful for that. And so because she has this background in emergency preparedness, we decided to do a test run. And we had a mass vaccination flu clinic on September 30th at the Milan, or the Greater Quad Cities Auto Auction in Milan, where we were able to vaccinate 150 people rather smoothly. So that was a great situation for us, and we're grateful for that opportunity. One thing in Illinois is probably about 15 years ago, there was a hepatitis outbreak. So we had a practice run there, and in 2008, 2009, there was the H1N1. So this is not completely new to us. We do have some background in mass vaccination. However, of course, like every other public health entity in the world, nobody who is living now has had any experience with something on this scale. So this is the information that I know that you all joined this call to get. When might the vaccine get to you? And as both Dr. Katz and Amy said, we know a little bit right now, and this is a little bit better than speculation, but it's not official yet. So you can't take this and run with it until our state health departments determine this is what is gospel. So phase 1A, healthcare workers, EMS, long-term care residents. We should expect this to last at least a month, maybe even closer to 6 weeks. Phase 1B, first responders, essential frontline workers. And then, as Amy said, we don't know exactly what the essential frontline workers will be, but we can expect it to be food and ag. Whether that means in our community, that's John Deere line workers, we don't know yet. Teachers, utilities, transportation. And then we move into phase 1C, which is people with health conditions that put them at significantly higher risk, and people who are 65 and older. Phase 2 will be workers and jobs important to society and people with moderate risk. And then phases 3 and 4, any workers not included in phases 1 and 2, children if they are approved, and young adults, and then everybody else who missed their opportunity to begin with. One thing I need you to understand is while we don't have all of the information, we are working on a plan to make sure that everyone in this community who wants a vaccination will receive it. So Illinois is a very diverse state. We have almost 13 million residents, and we have one of the largest cities in the world in our boundaries. So just to set you completely at ease, Chicago is getting its own vaccination directly from the federal government. So we will not have to share with Chicago's dosing. And then further, the state of Illinois has looked at vaccine distribution through a health equity lens. So they are looking at counties that have the largest disease burden and counties that have the largest health disparities. Rock Island County is one of those counties on both of those counts. So right now, NITA is in an undisclosed location picking up the vaccine. Later today, there will be 1,000 doses coming to Rock Island County, and we will distribute them evenly between Unity Point Trinity and Genesis. And as I said, Chicago is getting its own, so they're not taking it from the rest of us. At some point, the other 50-some counties in Illinois will be getting their fair share, but right now Rock Island County is among the prioritized ones. So just to give you an idea of what the numbers might look like in these phases in the state of Illinois. I've broken it up between the entire population, estimates for Rock Island County, and I got these numbers based upon census and Bureau of Labor Statistics. Rock Island County, as you probably know, has a lower median income and a higher prevalence of people working in critical infrastructure jobs. So our numbers are, fairly high. We are estimating in phase 1B. We think that these numbers could be a little bit fluid, but like I said, these are our estimates, and we have plans in place to get people the vaccine as soon as possible. So how will you know when it's your turn for the vaccine? First of all, there's no list. So no one needs to call the health department to get on a list. And if anyone contacts you about getting on a list and happens to ask you some financial information, hang up immediately. That is a scam. We are hearing about that. The Federal Trade Commission issued an alert yesterday saying that there are scammers out there trying to bilk unsuspecting people because their people are so scared. And during any uncertain time, that's when scammers tend to come out, and this has been no exception. And as Amy mentioned, we ask for your patience. This is the largest public health response in modern history. We want you to know that we have a plan for you, and your turn will come. And that's all I have. Any questions for me? I'll be eager to answer them. Thank you.
All right. That was great insights. Thanks, Janet. I'll invite our other panelists to turn on their cameras as we get ready for our Q&A portion. You'll also see that we have representatives from Genesis and Unity Point joining us today. So Melissa Wood is their Chief Nursing Officer, nurse executive from Unity Point Health Trinity, and then Al Leffelholtz from Genesis Emergency Preparedness. So thank you very much for joining. And we've had a lot of questions asked in our chat and Q&A section. You've all probably seen some of them. I'm going to take them in the order in which they were asked. There's been a few that have already been answered in the presentation. So we're hoping that the people who asked those heard those responses. If not, please retype them. I'm going to start with a question about how many people have received the vaccine to date and any side effects that you can address. I know that was a topic last week. Dr. Katz, that might be something for you.
Oh, well, locally, I don't have any numbers, but the Pfizer trial was over 40,000, half of whom got the vaccine, half placebo. The Moderna trial was 30,000, again, half and half. So there's in the range of 35,000 US people who have received the 2 messenger RNA vaccines. And I showed you the safety and efficacy data. Just remarkable, enormously better than I expected.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Katz. I'm going to go to the questions from Todd McGreevy next. He's asked 4 questions. I'm going to take the first 2 because they're both consistent, and then we'll move on to the second 2. The first ones are about legal or financial liability from vaccine manufacturers. Can you address that one, Dr. Katz?
Yeah. So there's a law called the PrEP Act, P-R-E-P, of 2005. And I can't remember what PrEP stands for, but it's the PrEP Act of 2005, and it provides broad liability protection for the entire supply and operational chain in public health emergencies. It was confirmed in March that it applies to this pandemic by Secretary Azar at HHS. And the only exceptions, it's pretty complete protection from liability. The exceptions are for willful misconduct that results in serious physical harm. So there is an out, but it's kind of a negligence sort of standard, and people are not going to be able to get compensated for a sore arm and having to miss work for a day or 2, those sorts of things. So there's very complete liability protection.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Katz. The next question came in and was about health officials and those who are receiving the vaccine. Is there a liability waiver or some consent that the recipient of the vaccine is signing or completing when they receive the vaccine?
Amy or Janet, you want to deal with that one?
Sure.
I can take that. Oh, go ahead, Amy. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we've heard considerable discussion about consent. We require individuals to sign a consent form anytime they're receiving vaccine, and are working on that for this one, and will continue to. I also know that the National Pharmacy Partnership is providing consent forms and lots of information so that families can make decisions on whether or not their loved one in a long-term care facility or assisted living chooses to be vaccinated or not.
Thank you, Amy. Next question was maybe for Al or Melissa about Genesis and Unity Point requiring their nursing, medical, or even admin staff to take the vaccine as a condition of employment. Is that something that you're considering, or what's your approach?
This is Al at Genesis, and for us, it is not mandatory for our staff or our physicians, but we are strongly encouraging them. And to give a little bit of information on that, we had a survey, and with over 5,000 responses so far, 72% of our employee staff, including nurses, have said yes to the vaccine, and 97% of the physicians have said yes to the vaccine. So that's really positive, encouraging numbers. And back to the point of local vaccination, Yesterday, we started the vaccination process here at Genesis in Davenport, and we started slow with 65 employees, but now we're going to be doing about 140 to 150 employees per day here in Davenport. And when we open up our Silvis operation today, we'll again start off slow, but we're going to be targeting that 140 plus people per day to get the vaccine. And that's a day after the University of Iowa and Unity Point and Methodist received their shipments on Monday. We received ours on Tuesday.
Perfect. Thanks, Al. Melissa, do you have a comment from Unity Point?
Yep. So we are the same as Al just mentioned. We are not requiring it for our team members here at Unity Point. Same for the clinics. So we will start our clinics today in Rock Island when we get the vaccine. Janet mentioned they're en route hopefully today to get that. And we will, if we have full schedules, do close to 200 per day on both sides in Bettendorf and Rock Island when we have the full clinic days. So similar to what Genesis is doing as well.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Paul, can I say something? Because I think that people in the chamber are going to be interested in mandates as time goes on. And in the US code that allows emergency use authorization, there is a right to refuse, which some people think means that you can't mandate an EUA vaccine. But there's another clause in that section of code that says a right to refuse and what the consequences of refusal would be. So it's not legally understood at this point whether a private employer or anybody else can mandate these vaccines, and probably requires a determination by the Secretary of HHS. From a practical standpoint, I would, and I'm a big fan of vaccine mandates and pushed Genesis for years to have a flu vaccine mandate for their employees. And it finally happened after I left, I think. But at any rate, it's a little bit of legal limbo. And I have an analysis from the RAND Corporation if anybody wants to see it. But I think I would wait a little while. I would not advocate a mandate until we have 4 or 6 months of data as opposed to 8 weeks.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Katz, for answering that question that I had not yet asked. That's good work. That was the next question. There might be the chambers also, as Dr. Katz said, there's a lot of opinion on that one. We may have an event with some legal experts in the coming weeks to help answer some of those questions. So thank you, Dr. Katz, for doing that one. Next question I have is about home healthcare staff. Are they included in 1A? It seems a little unclear. In either Illinois or Iowa. Amy or Janet, can you address that one?
As far as we know, they are. It's very broad healthcare status. Oh, you know, as Dr. Katz had in one of his slides, it's anyone who is doing direct patient care or protecting the public health. Okay,
thank you, Amy. Anything to add on that one?
No, I think we're still waiting for a little bit of definition from that Iowa Disease Advisory Council. You know, we certainly know a visiting nurse going in is different, but is a home helper that's coming in to but to provide meal service or cleaning, things like that. We don't know if we'll get some definition on that or if we'll just proceed with continuing to move forward with that definition that we've been given.
Okay. Thank you for answering. Next question, and I'm sorry, I'm going to keep going fast, so I appreciate your succinct replies to these. What about preference between vaccines? You talked about the many that are on the way. Any preference?
At this point, reviewing the ones I think are realistic, I think one of the mRNA vaccines, because I can't imagine the others being as effective as they are. Between the two, whichever one I can get.
Got it. Thank you for that. We have a question. During this panel, Governor Reynolds announced some new approaches, including lifting curfews and removing social gathering limitations. Dr. Katz, any response to that?
Amy doesn't want me to express my opinion. No, I think it's too soon. I think it's way too soon.
Well, thank you for the answer on that one. So we have a few clarifications. We have one about how long for those who've tested positive for COVID should they wait until they get a vaccine?
Well, they don't have to wait. And I think that's pretty clear in what both FDA and ACIP have said. But in short supply, if somebody had a well-documented case and has recovered, I think 90 days will give other people who have not had COVID the opportunity to get theirs. So 90 days, probably.
Okay. Thank you. Question about who's considered to be EMS? Is a volunteer fireman, do you think, included in that, or do we have a definitive statement on that?
In Iowa, we've been told if they're responding to 911 calls for medical emergencies, they would be considered in that classification. If they're strictly a fire department, which we know most in Iowa are not, then they would be further down.
Okay. Janet?
Same in Illinois. Most of the fire departments have paramedics, and so all of them would be getting the vaccine. But if it's strictly firefighter, they might be lower down, but more to come on that.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 more questions. I think we can get through them all. Will phase 1A and 1B be administered per the state that you live in or per the state that you work in? This is a fun Quad Cities question.
Doesn't matter is how I read it.
Answer is yes.
If you live in Illinois and work in Iowa, we'll still immunize you if you're a healthcare worker that qualifies. Is that correct, Amy?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So any direction for pregnant women or people who plan to become pregnant? Any thoughts in terms of whether or not they should get the vaccine?
Well, it's an interesting question, and pregnancy and lactation are high on everybody's list of we want more data. It is a shared decision-making sort of exercise between that person's provider and the individual. And I think it depends on how much risk you're at. So if I was a pregnant ICU nurse or physician, I would absolutely take the vaccine. There is no evidence that it's dangerous, and plenty of evidence that COVID-19 is not good for people who are pregnant. But it's a shared decision-making, risk-benefit sort of exercise.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Katz. Al, this next question is for you. You did address how many vaccines that Genesis is, or that Scott County is getting, and there's a question about 200 vaccines per day. Is this based off the number of vaccines that you're receiving?
No, we received the first shipment in Iowa. We received 975 doses, and that's based on the volume that we can handle through the clinic per day, keeping everything organized.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then my last question for you is, with potential of COVID being transmitted after vaccination and still suggesting masking and distancing, is there an end in sight for masking and social distancing? What's your reply to that one?
Talk to me in 2 or 3 months. So we're accruing data on the impact of the vaccines on infection and transmission as opposed to illness. And that's critical data that we need to know. And then we need to know how long immunity protection lasts from infection and transmission. And then we need to know what constitutes herd immunity to make that calculation. So it's going to take months to have early estimates.
Okay. And I lied. I have one more question. What should businesses be doing now to prepare for when their employees are eligible for the phase? What can they do to prepare, and what do they need to know based off of some early lessons learned? Anyone want to jump on that one?
I can say that they should be planning their schedules to allow for the potential that someone wants to take a day off after getting their vaccinations. And I think that they should be thinking about, allowing people time off to get their vaccination, whether, and we're still determining whether it's going to be a mass vaccination clinic or if there will be for the largest employers, whether we would come to them. And there's also a pharmacy partnership that is being formed in Illinois. So people may just be able to go to pharmacies like their flu shot and get it. But people will need time off to do that. And so scheduling and time off are probably my biggest ask.
Okay, thanks, Janet. Any other takes on that one? Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate the time that our panelists gave us. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us and giving us a glimpse into what the next few weeks and months will look like. As you say, we're all in this together, and I really appreciate the partnership that we've had as a Quad Cities community to address COVID-19. And we know that we have a lot of work ahead of us, but there is light at that end of the tunnel. So today's town hall is the first in a series of information that the Quad Cities Chamber will continue to put out related to COVID-19, and we look forward to keeping you up to date as we get information. Hope you have a good day. Thanks.